You might think that Anno 1800 is a city builder game while looking at its screenshots, but it really isn't at its core. The game is much more of a resource and production chain management game than it is a city builder. Of course, there are city building elements, but it's much more about ensuring that your citizens receive the goods and services they need, like clothing, food, and also ensuring that your production chains get the necessary goods, like iron or other raw materials they might need. It also has some elements with RTS gameplay, like building sails and cannons to build warships to then fight other players, or AI. Like every other Anno game, you begin with a single ship and a small island. Your goal is basically to build new houses and production chains to sustain the population with what they need. For example, your population might require clothing, which will require sheep farms to produce the wool, which then workshops can then build the actual clothing in. They might want bread, which will require you to have wheat farms, and then feed those into windmills, which then input into the bread making buildings. It's a carefully balancing act that really requires you to carefully think about what you need to build, because you don't have enough of unlimited resources or funds to really just throw things out. So you really have to carefully plan, how am I going to get the right amount of supply and demand to provide for my citizens while also not bankrupting myself. Of course, eventually you'll outgrow your first island, and this is where Anno really hits its stride as a series. You'll colonize new islands to gather materials and goods and other things that you'll require for your main island, which is typically where you're going to have most of your population and most of your main buildings at. Then you set up trade routes with different ships of yours to carry and deliver those between the different islands. It's a lot of fun, and it's incredibly satisfying to set up a well-run trade empire. It really makes you feel like that boss of the Caribbean, just setting up these vast trading networks that bring goods from one area to another to then feed into the production chains. This time, Anno is set in the 1800s around the advent of technology like steam-powered ships and really the Industrial Revolution kind of as a whole. And it's pretty fun. It's a very fresh departure from the series' typical roots. In typical Anno fashion, you're not alone. Pirates may attack your ships, which will require you to build defenses or warships to stop, and there's also several AI factions or other players if you play multiplayer, which may want to attack your islands. And this is where the more RTS elements of the game come into play. This time around, given its more 1800s Caribbean colonization theme, Anno has both a new and old world, which is pretty fun, and a separate game map. So you have the old world and the new world, and both have goods and services that are exclusive to each. There's even unique buildings and construction things that you can build in them, which make them feel like very distinct things. It's also a lot of fun just to set up trade networks to bring things like coffee from the new world back to the old world to feed your people. It's really fun in that way. There's a campaign which I actually surprisingly liked. It's actually pretty good, which is really crazy because typically campaigns are absolutely awful in city builders. Basically, the premise of the campaign is that your family is being ruined by your uncle who claims you have these vast debts after the death of your father. The voice acting is phenomenal, and while the story is a bit hokey and lacking in certain areas, I did still enjoy it from start to finish. It serves as an excellent tutorial to the game's mechanics by gradually introducing you to the new mechanics and competitors to fight against. You'll gradually have goals that you can work towards, and it still plays very much like a sandbox where you can do whatever you want, so even if you don't even care about the campaign, you can just go around and do all the random stuff in the sandbox that you would normally do. It also contains some interesting quests and goals that'll add some narrative and lore elements to the world, which is a lot of fun. As I mentioned, there's quests in Anno 1800, and they're actually pretty fun. The other AI factions and your citizens will give you missions like finding a lost person, or helping a citizen find particular goods, or helping an AI by getting them a certain amount of whatever they want, or defeating certain pirates. The missions are a fun way to kind of break up the monotony of just focusing on your supply chain, and then it really gives you additional side objectives to do, which I really enjoyed. A pretty great addition is the ability to walk around in first person throughout your city. It's fun just to look around, and some people are going to love this. Of course, there's a lot of people who aren't even going to touch this at all, and I can't really blame them because it does look kind of ugly up close and personal, because obviously this game is meant to be played from a top-down, far-out view, but it does look a lot of fun when you're running around in first person mode. Multiplayer is here with both matchmaking and custom games to invite friends. The matchmaking works decently well, but Anno just isn't well suited for matchmaking games. Single games can take hours or days to complete over saves, so the larger player size games just don't work at all for matchmaking. There is smaller scale multiplayer 1v1s with goals that are much quicker to obtain, but you'll still be dedicating a lot of your time to complete a single match. It is fun just to get around with a friend and fart around building your own cities, but it is very difficult to get into this matchmaking just because the game just isn't particularly well suited to this style of gameplay. From a graphics standpoint, Anno 1800 hits it completely out of the park with gorgeous details, The cities look fantastic with exquisite detail in the buildings, the wagons, the citizens, everything going on. The terrain in the islands and the water is also great. There's just absolutely nothing that you could complain about when it comes to the graphics. The sound is nice, but the music grew a bit repetitive. It has a solid soundtrack, but there's just not enough. I loved the first 2 to 3 hours of the music of Anno 1800, but you'll end up hearing the same tracks over and over and over again that I just got completely sick of it and wanted to turn it off after like 3 hours because you're hearing that same song playing again and again and again. Another thing I didn't like about Anno 1800 is the horrible pathfinding, and this really comes to make the RTS style of the game just completely frustrating to deal with. Ordering ships around is the worst. They don't obey your orders half the time, and focus fire on specific ships doesn't even work. Sometimes they get stuck on islands or objects trying to move about. It's just a pain in the ass to order your ships to do anything. Sometimes you'll order a ship to attack something and they don't attack it, or other times they start attacking a ship and just running off in the distance until they get sunk by the pirate base. It's just ridiculous. The pathfinding and AI in this game when it comes to the RTS side of it just sucks. The influence system is also the worst. Basically, you get a set amount of influence based on population and other factors, and influence is used to edit the newspaper to gain benefits like happiness or extra money, or used to purchase warships or claim new islands. It's an oppressive system because it goes against the entire point of the Anno series by punishing you for expanding to new islands. Each island incurs a heavy penalty, and purchasing new ships is penalized as well. It just completely ruins the whole point of Anno, which is to build a vast Caribbean empire spanning across islands with all sorts of ships and things. I just hate the system as a whole, as it actively punishes you for playing and doesn't give you any benefits of any real value. Being able to pause while building would also be nice. Currently, when you pause the game, it hides the game UI and prevents you from doing anything. Royal tax is another system that I absolutely hate. Basically, your population is divided into 5 different classes. Each class can only have 1,000 people in it, and if you go over that, you're heavily punished through increased tax costs per population of that class. I feel like it's just an oppressive system, much like the influence system, because it punishes you for building large cities, which I don't like. It forces you to play the game in a certain way that the developer wants, and I don't really like that. And it also kind of ruins the point of things like ferries, which can move population from one island to another to do a job or whatever. It's just a stupid system. Another thing I don't like is when you conquer an island, you get 2 different options. You can either take a share, like a stock share that gives you income, and if you get enough shares, you can take over the island itself, or you can just conquer the island. Conquering the island destroys all the buildings, though, which is dumb because it makes the entire point just kind of pointless, because then you just get a ruined island. For some reason, they also didn't include an easy way to see production and demand on each island. In Anno 2260, you were given the option to be able to see how much you were producing or consuming of different items, and in Anno 1800, you have to basically guesstimate by seeing if your good count is going higher or lower, or seeing if the arrow is pointing up or down for demand on your trade hubs. It's just a dumb system. I don't know why they didn't include this when their previous iteration had it. Overall, while I love Anno 1800, it has some issues that just really bother me. Setting up trade routes to create the perfect trade empire is so much fun in an 1800 setting, but there's so many small, little, tiny nitpick issues that just drive me nuts. The royal tax system, the influence system are far too punishing. Why isn't there a way to see production and demand on your island? Why does conquering destroy everything on the island? Why do ships sometimes just run into islands or go off in random directions when I want them to do something else? Anno 1800 gets a 7 out of 10. It's a great game for Anno and production chain management fans, but it really drops the ball on a lot of simple things. I can recommend this game still heavily to city builder or production chain management fans because it's a great game in its core. It just has a couple things that hopefully over time they'll fix in patches. I really hope so, but they're just some small, tiny little issues that really drive me nuts.